Hello, I've been in the real estate business for decades and I've seen lots of ups and downs. And I can tell you right now is a fantastic opportunity for somebody who's looking to buy a property. Just this week, I saw an article in the news saying this was the worst market in the last 25 years, right here in the Kelowna area. And that's a good thing for some of you. Sellers who are looking to get into that market have to pay to play. So they have to sell their property, essentially give somebody else a good deal on theirs in order to get into the market. But if you're a first-time buyer, you don't have to pay to play. And as long as you play it right, you're going to finish out way ahead. And years from now, you're going to look back on this moment in time as a really important, fundamental stepping stone to your financial security. But you've got to do it right. And in this video, I'm going to be walking you through the do's and don'ts for first-time buyers, and I'm going to be giving you some of my experience. So even if you're using another agent without my experience, you're welcome to use some of the tips and tricks I give you. And at the end of the video, we're going to be giving you some access to some really important information on what programs are available from the government for first-time buyers, and what special programs we have on our team that will help to save you some money and get you some really neat incentives that are only available to those working with us. I'm also, as a bonus, going to give you some tips, a one-pager, some tips on how to negotiate the best deal, because there's basically a 3% difference between the best and the rest. So I'm talking about from the best agents to just an average agent. And 3% when you're talking about, $2, $3, $4, $5, $1 million is a lot of money. So again, if you're using your best buddy who's just got his real estate license, that's great. We've all got to start somewhere, but we're going to give you some info at the end of this so you can help coach them along and make sure you get the best deal. One of the very first things that's going to happen when you start to think about a journey towards buying a property is you're going to be online looking at properties, obviously trying to get a feel for what you can afford, what you like, all those things. But as soon as you start doing that, you're going to be hearing from realtors, or maybe hearing from people that work for realtors in foreign countries, and basically feeling kind of pressured. It's probably not pressure. They probably just want to reach out to you to figure out if you're ready to buy a house, and they're really excited about helping you. But it certainly feels like pressure, especially if you're not ready for that. So one of the things I get asked very commonly is do I really need an agent? If I do, how do I go about picking one? And, at what point in the sale should I actually be talking to one? So number one, you don't actually need a real estate agent if you don't want to use one. You can just call around people and see listings directly with the listing agent, going from listing to listing to listing, maybe check out some for sale by owners, and try and represent yourself and deal that way. That can be difficult because the service you're going to get from any given agent, if you show up at his property to see the listing, he knows he's got like a 1 in 30 chance of ever doing any business with you. He's also got a built-in loyalty to the seller. And so what you'll find is while people think they're getting a great deal because they might be saving some real estate commissions, in reality, surveys done over decades show that people who represent themselves generally end up paying more for properties. And that is a truth over many, many different studies. However, if you feel more comfortable doing that, that's okay too. And we've got some information for you, as I said at the end of the video, on negotiating, which you can use. And certainly I would never stop anybody from doing that. And I know some people that have done it successfully. However, it's a lot smoother and a lot easier for 99% of the people, and also a lot more profitable if you get in touch with a great agent. When do I choose an agent? Well, generally that's by default. People will start to look at properties. They're not yet ready. They're not feeling comfortable. And then all of a sudden they go into an open house, or they go to see a property, or they bump into somebody at a dinner party just as they're feeling like, yeah, I feel like I'm ready to start looking at properties now. And whoever they meet, by default, they will work with, which can be great because if it's somebody you know already, you have a trust, and that should not be overlooked as having great value. But there is a difference. The best agents have a reputation for negotiating the best deals and making things go smoothly. I've done hundreds of real estate deals over the last few years, so I've seen all kinds of different problems which I would recognize in advance and save you from the hassle of getting even involved with. Whereas somebody who perhaps is less experienced will, run you headlong right into these problems, and you'll have to deal with them. That's not to knock an inexperienced real estate agent. Some of the best agents I meet on my journey are people who've just come into the business. They're really sharp. They're full of enthusiasm. I'm not knocking them, but experience does have a value also. And if you don't have a buddy who's in the business and you're thinking of engaging a real estate agent, using one of the top agents, more often than not, you'll finish ahead of the game. And so the question is when? When should I engage them? Well, really, I would say the first thing you need to do is, and we'll chat about it a little bit in the next section, is to get educated. And the most comfortable way to get educated is to get into properties and get a feel for values yourself without the pressure to buy. So if you engage a real estate agent early, you can use that agent to get into the properties and check them out and feel absolutely no pressure to buy and really get yourself educated. Because you need to understand property values. You need to understand what's important to you and what's not. Trust me, many people will say, I want this, this, and this. And when it actually comes down to it, those weren't the important things. And as we walked through the process, we found out that very different things turned out to be the determining factors in what they purchased. So I would say that the earlier you can engage an agent, the better, because you've then got a pressure-free environment in which to get educated. That said, the average agent has not done a deal in the last 3 months. It's a tough market out there, as we said at the beginning. And so, they will probably feel some internal pressure to push things along. So again, another good reason perhaps to go with a more experienced agent who's already done enough business this year in May to pay the bills for the year and can let you work at your own pace. It's really important as you go through the process of purchasing a property to never feel pressure to buy and to always make sure that you're seeing all the properties available. And we'll talk about that a little bit later on too, because there are properties that are not online that top agents can expose you to, and often they're the best deals. So I think I answered the questions. Do I need an agent? 99% of people do. When should I engage one? I think as early as possible, but that's a personal decision. But there's some good arguments for getting on board as early as possible with an agent, even if you're 6 months to a year out from buying. And does it make a difference which agent I use? Absolutely. Surveys show that beyond a shadow of a doubt. But again, if you got a friend who's new to the business who you feel comfortable with, maybe that's got more value than saving 5 or 10 grand on the property, or maybe missing out on a property that that you wouldn't have otherwise heard about, because there's definitely a value to dealing with somebody you know. So all of this information is just general. You've got to decide what's best for you. A few moments ago, I alluded to the fact that the first phase of your journey as a first-time buyer is getting educated. And I think it's super important for people to get educated. First of all, you need to understand what you need, but also you need to understand values. Because if you came to see me or one of my team, we went out to look at 3 properties and we said to you, man, this is an absolute steal of a deal. You better jump on it. It's going to feel like pressure because you don't inherently know that yourself. You just kind of, taking our word for it, and it doesn't feel comfortable. But if you've taken the time well before you're ready to buy to get into properties, look around, understand the pros and cons of them, and then as they've sold, checked out those values, and you can see what is sold for what price, now you've got a feel for it. So buyers that are properly educated, I can walk into a house with them and they'll instantly say, oh, this is overpriced, or wow, this is a great deal. This one will be sold by the end of the week, or this one needs some work, but at the price it's at, as soon as it comes to market, this one will be sold. We should consider it. Let's get some quotes on getting it fixed up. Those are the kind of conversations we have with people who are properly educated. And so when we talk about education, the first phase is, what do you really want? And honestly, there's an old expression which is kind of negative that dates back to probably before I even became a realtor: buyers are liars. And buyers aren't liars, but what they tell you isn't always true because they don't know yet themselves what's true. So a really good agent is going to sit down with you at the outset and say what's important to you, but then why. So understanding the why will help them perhaps shift you into something else. So 3 bedrooms up is important to me because I have a young family. That's great, but maybe that will be the clue to giving them an idea about something that's maybe a little bit different. If privacy is important, somebody might want an acreage, and then when you dig down, it's because they really want privacy. Well, maybe you can have a property backing onto a golf course that is backing onto a bit that nobody walks on, and it's a really nice private environment, but a lot cheaper than an acreage, or closer into town. So you need to sit down and walk through what is important to you, but also why. And then you're also going to have to figure out, what compromises am I willing to make? Huge part of your education. Everybody makes a compromise. The guy spending $250,000 on a new apartment, the person spending 5 to 10 million. I've honestly worked with buyers who couldn't find what they wanted. They were very picky. They didn't want to make compromises. Ended up selling them a lot. They built a house for $5 million. Guess what happens? They call me over to look at the house. We walk through the property and they show me everything that's wrong with it. Nobody gets everything they want. So what is the compromises you're willing to make? Are you willing to be on a busy street to get a home with a nicer kitchen and some more square footage? Are you willing to take a steeper driveway to get a nicer house? Are you willing to take a fixer-upper because you're handy and maybe be in a better school district, but have some work to do? These are the things that you need to work out. And really, at the outset, you can have an idea of it, but as you go through the process of your education, you're really going to get to understand on a gut level what you truly are comfortable with. Because at the end of the day, everybody's buying process is a personal journey. So you need to get educated as to what you're comfortable with. You also need to get educated as to what you can afford. Working with a great mortgage broker is critical. I know even myself, on properties that I own, there's a key difference between working with an average broker and a really great one. Not just in the rates, in the way that it's structured, in the information they give you, in getting a letter if you're in multiple offers. They still happen today. The best deals will still go to multiple offers. I've experienced them twice this week, which, by the way, I never mentioned in the first video, is also a benefit of dealing with a more experienced agent, because when I get into multiple offers, more often than not, my clients win. And I just did one last week for a first-time buyer in Glenmore, and we won out, which was great for him because he really wanted the property. But we went out in a way that he wasn't overpaying. So it's kind of went a little bit off track there, but you need a good mortgage advice too. That's also part of the education. So once you understand what compromises you're going to make, what's really important to you, kind of maybe even narrow down the areas that you're willing to go with and maybe compromise a little bit on that. Now you're ready to go from the education stage to the execution stage, the exciting bit, where you are going to actually move ahead and get your dream home. So now you're all educated and you're ready to get out there and buy something. You are in such a good position as a first-time buyer. I mentioned at the beginning, you got to pay to play in this market in order to purchase a property if you already own a home. But the other thing with that is now you have a timeline. So somebody's moving into your home in 88 days. You need to find something real fast, which puts you in a different mindset to being that first-time buyer. I always use the analogy from my special forces days back in Britain when I was, in Iraq or somewhere. You are literally, as a person who's already sold a house and the clock's ticking, you're kind of like, kicking down doors looking for a target. It's high adrenaline. It goes from being exciting to very frustrating, extremely fast. It's stressful, and there's already enough stresses with buying a property. The time crunch can really get to you. Whereas as a first-time buyer, you're more like a sniper. You're just waiting for the right deal, the right home, the right price, and you pick it off. And so you're in an excellent position whereby you've got no baggage, you've got no pressure. We're just looking to get you the perfect home at the right price. And so the execution phase for you is a lot less stressful, I think, from the first-time buyers that I've worked with. Having said that, the people are excited to move into a home, so we need to get it done. The first part of the execution stage is, now that you're getting serious, I need to go out and look for the off-market listings that meet your criteria. So many of the best deals are either coming to market in the next few weeks, and the best deals sell fast. You will notice, if you've already been looking at MLS, there's two types of listings. The ones that have offers on already, that are already sold to somebody, or the ones that have been listed forever that are kind of stale that nobody else wanted. The ones that have offers on already often are sold even before they get to MLS, because the top agents in town are always communicating amongst each other. What have you got? I've got some people looking for a certain type of home, and we're getting into those properties before they get listed. We've also got distress sales, so people who are in a time crunch. I recently bought an investment property that way. I had to close it very fast in 13 days. But I got an investment property for $460,000 that my bank valued at $620,000. So an absolutely great deal, but it was a distress sale. They didn't even have time to get it onto MLS. So we have access to also what we call buyers in waiting. They're people who are looking to buy a property that haven't even listed their property yet, but if we could put together the right deal, they would also sell. So there's all kinds of people out there that have got properties for sale that you don't have access to, that the top agents do. And it's important for me, now that you're educated, and I'm educated too, because I've been following you around listening, it's important for me to go out and try and shop those. And sometimes people will say, oh yeah, off-market listings, is that really a thing? It's totally a thing. Not only did I just buy the investment property off-market, this studio is actually in the basement of my home, which I purchased when it wasn't on MLS. And my last property prior to that, I purchased before it went on MLS. So that's the last three properties that I've personally purchased that you cannot find online at the time I purchased them. They were available only to people who are sharp enough to be looking. And so if I buy my homes that way because they're good deals, we want to try and find you the good deals too, and do that same thing for you. So that's job number one. So we're looking at those listings. We're trying to get on top of things that are coming up online as fast as possible. And we are trying to jump on the best deals as fast as possible to try and find you the right property. So once you get to the execution stage, if you're not in town or not available, like, we've got to have spare time to, as soon as we hear about something, to get out there and look at it. If you can't join us, we need to get out there and check it out and take some video for you, because, by now we've been following you around. We know what you like. We need to jump on it as quickly as possible. One of the main things about the execution phase is the research to get to the properties as soon as possible, but it's also that sense of urgency to actually make sure you're jumping on it and getting into it as soon as possible. Because we find a really great home that meets all your criteria for a really good price. Now that you're educated, it's not going to feel like pressure. It's going to feel like excitement. You know what? Let's get this before anybody else does. Now to the fun part, the negotiation. I say the fun part because I really enjoy the art of negotiation, but sometimes for buyers it can be stressful. I think there's a couple of important things to remember when you're working with a top agent. The first one is, we consult, you decide. So ultimately, buyers will often make decisions that maybe I don't agree with. They might walk away from a deal that I think's great. Sometimes they might pay more for a property than I think they should. And because I do it all the time, it becomes almost like a sport for me. And so I've got to be mindful that we consult, but ultimately you make the decisions. And that's critical. I learned that again, because I should have known it already. I think it was about 13 years ago. I was working with Jackie. Her dad was a realtor, and she trusted me to help her sell her home and find a new one. And we went to look at some properties in this particular area, and there was one that I'd tried to buy with another couple, and the agent was pricing it way too high. The bottom line was $40,000 more than it was worth. And this was a type of house that I knew very well. There was lots of comparables. There was no way they should be getting that price. When we went to look at the property, Jackie said, "Oh, I really like this one." I said, "You know what? You wanted to see it, so I wanted to show you it, but I'll call the owners and see if they kind of softened their approach yet. But you don't want to be buying this one at the price they want. It's not worth it." So at the end of the day, she said, "I'm going to call my dad, have a chat with him about the different properties, and we'll meet in the morning for coffee and see where we go from there." So next morning, we sat having coffee, and I said to her, "So what did Dad say?" She said, "Dad said, don't let Steve's ego get in the way of me buying the property that I want." And we had a good laugh about it. His rationale was she was driving a car that would depreciate $40,000 over the next 3 years. At the end of the day, getting the right house is more important than getting the absolute right deal. And she ended up selling it for double 12 years later or so. So, at the end of the day, as much as I'm hyper-focused on always getting people the best deal, there is a value to getting the property that you like. I mean, if it's all about the deal, and I say this to buyers all the time, if it's all about the deal, let's go out and find a foreclosure, that's filled with dog poop, and we can get you an absolute crazy good deal on that. So as you move forward through the process, don't get too hung up on the deal. Same as don't get too hung up on the timing. Lots of people right now are holding off buying because they want to try and time the market. It's just about impossible. The reason is we never know where the top and bottom of the real estate market is until about 6 months after it. And so it becomes a matter of luck. And even at that, you might not be ahead. When we first moved to Kelowna, I wanted to rent a property. It was 2007. Market was booming, and I knew, looking at all the economic indicators, looking at the supply and demand picture, looking at everything, properties were going to start to go down, and it was going to fall off quite dramatically. So I wanted to rent for a few years until it bottomed out. My wife said, "No way. I'm not going to be a renter. I want to buy a home. I don't want to risk getting pushed out of the property that we have the kids in." So we ended up buying in late 2007. Had I rented in late 2007 and bought at the very bottom of that market cycle, which was somewhere around 2014-ish, it kind of leveled out in 2015, I did the math on it. And when I looked at how much I would have had to pay in rent for a house like that, how much I would not have been paying down my mortgage by, I actually finished out ahead buying when I did, even though I bought at the top of the market, because I ended up riding out that cycle and then going to sell it for a substantial increase when I did move into the next phase of my house buying cycle. So important to remember, even though negotiation's a sport for me, don't get too caught up in what you pay if it means not getting the house that you really love, and don't get too caught up in the timing. But one of the questions people always ask is, how low can I offer without offending people? And it's an interesting question. It all depends on what type of seller you're dealing with, how long it's been for sale, all those types of things. So that goes on a case-by-case basis. I remember once dealing with an elderly lady who had an over 55 apartment, and it had been listed several times with other agents. It was worth between $160,000 and $165,000. Lots had sold. I kind of knew that was what it was worth. It was previously listed just high enough that it was scaring off all the buyers. So we listed at $169. I promised her we wouldn't sell for less than $160. Well, a few weeks in, we had somebody come in and make us an offer of $140,000. She was not happy. And so lots of back and forth. I had to keep her at the table. And eventually, a week later, after this gentleman had borrowed some money from his kids, I marched triumphantly in with my offer of 162,000, and she said to me, "I'm not going to sell it to him." She said, "No, I know you've been working hard, but I've been thinking about it. He offended me with that offer of 140,000. I'm never going to sell it to him." So I said, "Eileen, put the kettle on. I'm sticking around for a cup of tea." She said, "How long are you staying?" I said, "Long enough for you to simmer down and sign this offer, because you're going to regret it if you don't." Now, a younger agent might have been intimidated by them, and those buyers might have lost the deal, even though they were offering a really fair price at that point, because they came in so low. So it's important to know who you're dealing with, and a good agent can find out who you're dealing with and figure that out. By the way, I went to see her with condition removals a few weeks later, and she gave me a big hug. She'd seen on global news how bad the market was. She was super happy that I had kind of helped her to make a good decision. And as much as I said at the beginning, you never want to feel pressured. Sometimes I have to give buyers a nudge and sellers a nudge. And if you do so with the right intention, that's fine. I remember Sharon and Tony were a few $1,000s apart on a house. We'd been looking for one for a long time. This was the perfect property for them. And it was literally just a few $1,000s. So I said to her, Sharon, it's like having one less Starbucks, every 2 weeks. That's the difference it's going to make on your mortgage. We're talking about nothing here. We're talking about $15 a month. And she turned around and said to me, "You're using your sales tricks on me here, trying to make it seem insignificant." And I said, "Yeah, I am. The sales trick is actually called the reduced to the ridiculous, because it is a ridiculous amount that we're arguing over. And this is the home you want. We've been looking now for months. This is the right one." So guilty as charged. I'm trying to help you get past those natural nerves and make a decision. And again, happy ending. When I went to the housewarming, she gave me a hug and said, "Thanks for giving me the nudge." Again, no deal is better than a bad deal. I'm not nudging people, one direction or the other if I don't think it's in the best interests. And again, I consult, you decide. Everybody on my team has that philosophy. So we're just nudging. We're not giving anybody any pressure. But sometimes, you got to handle those emotions. And part of that whole journey, and maybe part of the education is, as we're telling you, everybody has emotions. Buying a house is really emotional, and negotiation's super emotional. So you have to kind of get ready for that. I've done so many hundreds of millions, probably billions of real estate deals over the years, and billions of dollars worth. Sorry, not billions of homes sold. And I myself get buyer's remorse. So whenever I buy something, even if it's a great deal, a few weeks later, I'm dealing with buyer's remorse, and it's bothering me. A year later, I'm fine. But that can be important. So let's just say you get to a home inspection, and there's a few niggly things on a home inspection which really aren't that big a deal. By the way, every property has a to-do list. I can walk into any brand new property right now today and find you with an inspector and find some stuff that needs doing. We're looking when we do a home inspection to find some deal breakers, things that are going to be significant cost, or things that are going to make it so the home would not be suitable for you. But the odd niggly thing like the gutters need cleaning out or something, or the air filter needs changing. If you get enough of those, sometimes people will feel buyer's remorse like me, can start saying, "Hey, I don't want to buy this home," So again, we have to help you navigate those emotions. So the execution phase is also where we're educating you, talking about those things. So when it comes down to the negotiation, you can kind of step back and say, "Yeah, okay, Steve talked about this. I know what buyer's remorse is. I'm not going to let that get in the way of me making a good decision." Same as I will give people a nudge sometimes not to overpay in multiple offers, or in a foreclosure if we get to court and we're bidding against other people, because emotions can also get a hold of you the other way, where you get too excited and you end up overpaying. And this is not the market where you need to be overpaying for anything. I mean, if you want to, I won't let my ego get in the way of it, but ideally you don't want to be. So an experienced negotiator in closing should be able to save you 1 to 3%. Sometimes in a situation where you're in multiple offers, you will have to pay full asking price. We actually guarantee that you won't. Part of our VIP buyers program is that you will never have to pay full asking price, or we'll pay you. But we can send you some information about that also. What you need to know for now is that there are some simple tips and tricks for negotiation. We're going to give you in a little handout. So if you're using an agent who's maybe not an experienced negotiator, you can give it to them. We'll do that at the end of the video. I think that's about everything for negotiation. I could talk about it for hours and hours and hours. It would bore you. And if we end up doing business together, I'll tell you some of my really good stories in the car. So to wrap things up, I've only really touched on some of the important aspects of buying a property as it relates to first-time buyers. But there's a whole process, even just the actual contract stage, there's actually a whole process that you go through. Our team is actually very process-driven, and so we have a set routine for absolutely everything, right through to the after sale. So let's just say if you don't love the property that you purchase, maybe you move in and some new neighbors move in 6 months later and they're making your life intolerable. We have a guaranteed satisfaction program. So if at any time in the first 2 years you don't love the property you're in, we will actually buy it back from you at the price you paid, or we'll sell it free of charge. I can give you details of that also. In fact, we're going to, in wrapping this up, we're going to give you details of the first-time buyers program that you can request. We're going to give you some negotiation tips and tricks, and we're going to invite you to get some more information about our VIP buyers program. As I said at the beginning of the video, who you use is super important. If you've got somebody you're comfortable with, take our information and have a great experience. If you'd like to chat with us about our VIP buyers program, I've touched on a few topics on it. You can reach out to us. I think we'll put a link below here where you can book a time to chat with one of our people. And, a chat isn't high pressure. It's just a matter of having coffee for 10 minutes. Do we feel comfortable with you? We don't work with everybody we chat with. 2 out of every 100 people are crazy, and we don't deal with crazy. But more importantly, you can chat with us and feel whether you feel comfortable with our experience and making sure that it feels right for you. Because at the end of the day, you need to make sure that you feel comfortable. I mentioned that buying a home is emotional, so it's important to get that safety zone where you feel really comfortable, where you're not going to be pressured, but you also know you're in good hands and you've got competent representation that's experienced. So I'm going to close this out here. We'll leave you some links. My tech guy will probably figure out how that is to the further information. If you've got any questions, by all means, you can reach out and call me anytime as we can help you out in any way. Even if you use another agent, you want a bit of advice on one of my listings or something, call me anytime. I'm always here for people. Love helping people. It's why I do what I do.